If we're not engaging with others out of a conscious desire to have them feel valued and respected, then we have lots of opportunity to improve and enrich our connections. Welcome to the Q4 Impact Podcast, where through scripture, story, and conversation, we inspire you to make an impact all the way through the fourth quarter of your life. Have you ever struggled to connect with others in conversation? I think if we're honest, even the most outgoing of us have encountered those times when we found it challenging to engage well with the person in front of us. The reality is we can all learn how to better engage with others. And when I think about the benefits that would bring, oh my goodness, I get excited about doing this well. So in today's episode, we are joined again by Judah Regenstrife. And for those of you who had the joy of hearing from Judah in a previous episode, you may have guessed that he's a people person. Yet, having worked for years in sales and leadership, he has also not relied just on his personality to be able to engage well with others. Rather, I think it's safe to say that he's chosen to become a student of this topic, and I am thankful for one that you are willing to be with us today to share some of the learning that you have gained. So welcome back, Judah.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. An honor and a joy to be back. Our first podcast, I thought, was a lot of fun. I thought we hit on a great topic. And so I'm excited to be here with you both on this topic, because this one is, as you said, near and dear to my heart. And so I'm excited to dig into this and discover and uncover some ways that we can all learn and grow and be better at engaging with people.
Awesome. Yeah, we engage with people, all the time. And regularly, even adding the engagement of being on the freeways in Los Angeles. There's a lot of engaging that's going on, and a lot of it is not so good. But even more than that, the challenge, just the everyday interactions with store clerks and bank tellers and customer service representatives. And I think as believers, we want every interaction, or we should want every interaction or engagement with others to reflect God's love. And so our focus today is on how to do that with those individuals with whom we have a passing interaction with, or a more serious interaction with. So Susan, I'm reminded of the episode I think we aired in June about learning how to listen, or the elements of what is it that makes up someone who listens first and listens well. And it's not something that's automatic, and it's something I think that can be learned. And I think we're going to point out some things in our conversation today that will help us all to be able to engage with others better.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good. It's even before learning to listen well, I remember coming up with this silly little phrase, because it starts with really our walk with the Lord, right? And what we believe that by becoming a disciple of Christ, how should our life reflect this joy in our salvation, and how we're to treat people, right? Jesus summed up all of the law with two things: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And I think sometimes maybe we focus on the first over the latter. And so there was this little silly phrase. I remember walking around sometimes questioning and thinking, why are so many believers, they look so distraught and maybe sad or struggling or whatever. And so it was this silly little phrase of, maybe our heart needs to remind our face that we're saved, that the joy of the Lord is our strength. And that truly, if we have received this gift of salvation, then our life, our countenance, our eyes, our smile, our face should reflect that. And I know that could also be taken to an extreme of maybe someone would say, well, Judah, are you saying that you should just pretend and fake it, even when you're going through difficult times? And I would say no, and maybe we'll get into this on this episode. And I like to just dive right into being honest and vulnerable. And my wife and I are going through some stuff right now, some struggles. She's got some health issues, and my mom has some health issues. And so, does it mean that you pretend like nothing difficult or hard is going on? No, I don't think that. But there still should be a love and a joy that radiates from us, because we know that life is temporal, and that our eternity is what's at stake, and that's what's most important. So anyway, so I think it almost starts with that, of like reminding ourselves, wait a minute, I have the gift of salvation. I have the joy of a relationship with my Heavenly Father. So that in and of itself should make us engageable with people. But getting specifically to the topic of listening, I think to start, I think we've got to actually love and care about the person we're talking with. I think that's where it starts. So how do you become a good listener? It probably begins with caring about the person you're talking to. That you're really interested in what they have to say and who they are. And I think if we start there, that our relationship will springboard, from there.
I agree with you. And Ron, you brought up the episode we did on listening, and the guest for that was Scott Fine. And I remember something that he specifically said in that podcast, and it was that listening is love's best friend. And that really ties in what you're saying, Judah, of loving others well, genuinely caring for them out of the love of God that is in our heart. And then a fruit of that is going to be listening. And it's true, like the one who loves well is going to be more prone to listen well. And it's also important that caring for others, that we recognize that is not our natural bent. Now, yes, when we have been saved, our heart is changed. We are a new creation, but I'm still a sinful human being. I don't always feel the emotion of love and care for someone. And I think if we're honest, we'll all say that we do meet people that are difficult, and it does not come naturally for us to love them. I think another aspect to this is referring to that same sinful nature. We are wired to give to get. And I laugh because my son, who is just 10, has a very common line these days, and he'll often tell me, he's the epitome of a negotiator. Judah, he may be going into sales and following your footsteps.
Let's go.
I'll do so-and-so, and you give me whatever it is that he's wanting in that moment. And my response is usually, this is not a negotiation.
Yeah.
But he wants to make it that. But seriously, with others, when we're engaging, we can sense right away if someone is just in it to get something for themselves or to serve their own purposes. And not only is that a huge turnoff, but doesn't our guard just go up immediately against that? And that prevents us from starting to engage well. And we don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
As followers of Jesus, as you're talking, we believe that being able to love others well stems from first experientially knowing his love for us. And I love what Jesus says in John 15:12. This is my command. Love one another as I have loved you.
That's so good, Susan. And to add, and I hope this doesn't take us off too much on a tangent, but even our ability to listen and engage with others is so challenged in today's day and age of technology. Of thinking of maybe like the benefit of technology is that you and I can have a Zoom call. But a temptation with technology is that during a Zoom call, I could also be doing emails, right? Or we could be standing there with somebody who is talking to us, and we could have our phone in our hand, and we could be texting or typing or scrolling on social media and not being fully engaged in that moment, because maybe we are being trained to multitask and have a lot of things going on at the same time. And so I think also stepping back and taking that approach of, wait a minute, this person is important to me. I care about this person. They mean something to me. They may need something from me. I need to be present with them. And so being a good listener, I think also is going to require us to kind of take inventory of the moment and call ourselves into accountability of, am I here? Am I engaged? Do I really care about this person? Or am I just kind of checking off a box or something of, yeah, I spoke to this person, I can move on, or I've got other things to do. So I'll give them a minute or two, but I got to move on. So, yeah, that's a challenge, I think, in today's age of guarding ourselves from being distracted in these times of engagement. I think what you said too, Susan, in regards to getting something from it, I think that could be a challenge, even from the standpoint of kind of what I do in sales, in that myself or my sales team have real sales goals, and if they don't sell, they don't eat, or they don't keep their job. And so there's a risk of, even in a professional environment, that I'm only here in front of you because I'm trying to get an order. And that may be true by and large, but I think that the people that are successful in sales get the order not necessarily because they're just pushing for it, though you always got to ask for an order. All you salespeople, don't forget to ask for the PO, but because they're actually caring about the customer that they're standing in front of. That they want to get to know that person. They want to meet their needs beyond the product or service you may be selling. And when that customer or potential client feels like you actually care about them as a person, I think they're more willing to give you an order. So I think there's so much to this topic. This is so good. I love this.
Judah and I, we've talked about this over the years a lot. There's some funny comedians that actually do some things about the back and forth of what conversations are like, and I just go, I want to go there. I see it so often. You say, what is it that causes a connection between two people? So, here are the choices. I could tell you, if I haven't met you yet, all of the things that I've done. And I did this, and I went here, and I experienced that, and I have this number of children, and these are my grandkids, and you're going to say, well, Ron's a great guy, and what an interesting man he is, and look at all the things he's done. But I don't know I do know it's not as, what's the right word? It's not as effective as me spending the time in conversation getting to know the person I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So, and asking them questions and learning about their children and their grandchildren and what they've done for a living and what difficulties they've had in their lives. And that to me is, I guess, I know Judah and I are the same. Susan is also very good at that. To me, that is a key element of attracting a person to be engaged with you, is when that's what caring about another person to me is like. If I care about you, then I want to know about you. Mm-hmm. I don't want to tell you about me. That to me is more caring about me. And people feel loved and feel cared for when you get into their space and their world and want to understand what's going on with them. Yeah. But if in the conversation you keep bringing the topic back to yourself, then it almost feels like a ping pong game. I'm going to tell a story, and as soon as in my story, I hit something that you're familiar with, then you're going to tell your story that relates to that. And then I'm going to say, oh yeah, well, I also did this and that. And it's not an effective way to connect with someone or to make someone feel cared about. Yeah. So how would you add to that, Judah?
Yeah, that's good, Dad. And I think, we're trying to come up with and figure out what are some practical ways for people to learn, how to engage. So we, of course, just start off with just caring about the person. And then this idea of getting to know them, of asking them questions, asking them open-ended questions, like questions that aren't just a yes, no, for example, not just a, uh, uh, how are you doing today? Good. Like that's an easy way to just kind of one-liner. But rather than, did you do something fun and exciting today? Did you have any interesting conversations? Did you have any struggles today? How was your vacation? Even that could just be a good answer. So instead of that, it's hey, tell me what you did on your vacation. What was the most exciting thing that you did? What kind of hotel did you stay in? Those kinds of open-ended that will cause somebody to have to engage and open up. Because I think that most people are afraid of interaction with people. I think that most people maybe aren't great at starting up new conversations, of meeting new people and creating friendships. And so if both people have this mindset or this understanding of how to do that by way of asking good open-ended questions, with the base of caring about the other person and actually wanting to get to know them, I think that's a great practical kind of 1-2 step in starting this process and getting on that road of engaging with people. That help a little or?
A little bit. Well, what stands out to me, and it's kind of interesting as I listen to the two of you ping pong.
We love ping pong.
How do I say this? What you described, Ron, of a person saying, well, I did this and then I did that, that is, I believe, an attempt at connecting. They're finding commonalities. And yet what Judah's saying is perhaps there's a need for a learned skill of how to take that attempt at connecting into now connecting at a deeper heart level. And that is where the genuine caring comes from and can get reflected. But it is a skill. This is not something that is natural to many people. For some, perhaps, but it is learned. I remember taking a communication course my freshman year of college, talking about some of these very same things, because it doesn't come naturally to us. But what I want to stress in this, and what we kind of started with, Judah, it is what gives rise to our purpose for doing that. Anyone can learn a 1-2 punch.
Right.
We want to reflect the love of God in the way that we connect. And so isn't that an important motivation for learning these skills, to be able to then have the entree into people's lives to foster a deep connection and be able to share his love? That gets exciting.
Totally. I mean, I think of, Paul said, become all things to all people so that you might win some to Christ. And I think that actually plays into this topic as well of like the becoming all things to all people, meaning I want to get to know you. I want to connect with you. I want to learn your ins and outs, your strengths and weaknesses, your pains and celebrations, so that there can be a connection, so that there's a place then for me to speak into your life, so that one day I can share the gospel with you. I mean, that's the end goal in the context of, relationship with the Lord and each of our callings here on this earth, right? And so, I think that's a big piece of it.
Yeah. It's kind of funny for me to say this, but I know my story, and my story's interesting, but I already know it. So I don't necessarily have to replay it. I love and I value learning about other people. And I think I value that more than necessarily talking about my own latest encounters. I find people fascinating. And there's no better way to engage than learn about the experiences that they had, and to hear about, growing up in a dysfunctional family and what that meant when they were young, and what happened when they went to college, and how did they make their decisions. And then again, that goes to what you were saying. Now you understand the other person. And so you're waiting, or you're observing, or you're hoping that there'll be a connection for you to encourage them, whether it's presenting the gospel when they've never embraced it, or in trying to inspire them to take steps to draw closer to the Lord and to work on their relationship. And and rather than just telling stories about what you did, it's wanting to glean and to have an opportunity to make a deposit in someone's life.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's important too. This sounds maybe silly, but kind of the practicality of this, trying to come up with some tangible things that people can take from this podcast that hopefully, is helpful and beneficial. But something that I think of maybe almost every time I'm engaged in a conversation is I keep a running clock in my head. And I think that's critical. I think kind of to your point, Dad, earlier of we can get on a rant or tangent about ourselves. And for most people, when that internal clock goes off and it's a subjective time frame, is it 60 seconds? Is it 2 minutes? I don't know. Each person has to figure that out. But if one person is dominating the conversation, then what happens to the other person is they start to disengage and they start to maybe actually get frustrated and angry and lose interest in even wanting to get to know you further because they feel like, oh my goodness, this guy a person nonstop talks about themselves. Like, is this an interaction or is this a monologue or a dialogue, And so a practical thing for me is I am trying to be mindful of that, of how much talking am I doing in this interaction? Because if it's too much, I'm going to lose the other person. And I don't want that. I'm talking to you because I want to build a relationship with you. So I think that's an important key, that we're mindful of that. Yeah.
Okay. So the three of us here, we have a passion for this, as we have said, and some training in this. And so maybe we are already, I'll just use us as an example, already applying these tools, if you will, for the most part, trying to, self-talk, make sure we're present, not distracted, asking open-ended questions, listening well, internal timer so we're not dominating a conversation. Even with all of that, have the two of you ever found a conversation still just kind of go flat?
Yeah, sure. Probably not between us, but yeah.
Between us.
Right.
We could probably talk for days.
Right.
But when that happens, Judah, what are some thoughts that you have of how to maybe foster that, or what do you do when that happens?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it ties back for me to the open-ended questions, and having a mindset of, I'm not here to tell you about me. My role in this is I want to learn about you. And so, so maybe it is a good practical thing to do on everybody's downtime to come up with a list of 5, 7, 10 questions that you memorize or you have in your mental back pocket, so that when there's a lull in the conversation, there's an already kind of agreed upon list of questions that are engaging and interacting with somebody. So I think that's where I go. If a conversation starts to lull, then I'm trying to think of what's another question I can ask this person to get them to talk and to share. And of course, there's wisdom too in not belaying the conversation. Is that the right word? To not drag the conversation out. There's a healthy time and a point, in the conversation where, I think we covered everything. It's time to move on. And so having some wisdom and discernment in not continuing to ask all these questions. And so there's a body language reading, that needs to take place when you're engaging with someone. Are they paying attention? Are they looking at me? Are they looking around, as I'm talking? So they're clearly not interested in what I'm saying, right? So those kinds of things, I think, help in those moments.
I don't know, Susan, I think two things will happen when you're with a person who has the tendency to just talk about themselves. You either check out yourself or you recognize that this is going to be one of those relationships that we all have where you're pretty much on the giving end and the listening end, and it's likely that not a lot is going to come back to you. And so we all have relationships, some like that, where we just know if so-and-so comes over, it's going to be all about them and they're going to share their problems. And there's a part of us that we we all should have people who are needy like that in our lives, and be patient and learn to stay in it and be compassionate. And at the same time, we also have to have relationships where it's give and take, and where it's beneficial to both parties. And so you want both of those. If you're the type of person, though, that's continuously just focusing on you and telling your stories, then you're not likely going to have a lot of those mutual kind of intimate friendships where it's really it's good for both people. And that's what we're trying to encourage. Be the kind of person to be able to develop those friendships and those relationships where it's give and take. So
maybe a silly analogy, but I always think of, and here's a shout out to my mom, but my mom is I think very good at this as well. And I remember as a little boy, she teaching us this idea that gave us this visual of playing catch, that relationships and conversations are like playing catch. And there's usually, two people minimally, and the ball is the conversation. And if you're holding the ball the whole time, you're not playing catch. You're holding the ball. So the game of catch works when one person has the ball, throws it to the other person, they catch it, maybe they hold it for, a couple seconds or whatever, but then they throw it back. And our conversations should be like that. Our interactions with each other should be that. That's that mindset or mentality of having that internal clock of, am I talking too much? Am I not talking at all? Is the other person talking too much? Am I not giving them opportunity to speak? So it should be a catch, of topic, a catch of conversation that I think makes for a healthy relationship.
I like that analogy. I'm about to take us in a wrap up. Ron, is there anything else you would like to share before I do that?
No, I think we've covered some good ground, Suze.
Okay. All right. Friends, as you've listened today, on the surface, the steps we've talked about may sound simple, but I think they actually fall under the category, as much common sense as they may hold, that they speak easy, but they live hard for all of the reasons we've talked about: our own wiring, our own selfishness, our own distractions. This requires intentionality, and ultimately we want it to come from what God has put into us, being known and loved by Him, so that we take a vested interest in knowing and loving others. So this is much more than simply making and enjoy good connections, because when we apply these steps, whether it's business interactions or with a stranger with whom we may find ourselves engaging at a social gathering, or Ron, I know you recently had one on a park bench, I think. We want to have those connections out of our love for the Lord. It's only then that we're going to have the opportunity to do what Paul writes about in Philippians 2:15, to be blameless and pure, children of God who will shine like stars in the world. And isn't that what we want in our connections? So, Judah, you brought up a couple of very practical things. Make that list of 5 to 7 open-ended questions. Have your mental time clock going. And we want to challenge you. What practical ways will you apply what we've talked about today to fulfill those 2 most important commandments that Judah referenced at the beginning? Loving God and loving others. We would love to hear from you. So please join us next week as we discuss another form of engagement, that of staying engaged during difficulties when we're more naturally prone to want to distance ourselves. Thanks for listening today. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Q4 Impact Podcast. To continue receiving encouragement and practical tips on how to live with purpose and meaning through the many changes and challenges of life, please be sure to subscribe. And please share it with others you think may also benefit.